For most immigrants who've come to live in Britain, they're often asked the question, where are you from? I've been asked that plenty of times. And it's led me to question, where am I from? What is home? Is it a location? Is it the place where you were born? Is it a town, a village, a community? Or is it just a feeling? And I think for me, it's about belonging and it's about identity. And it goes even deeper. It's about who we are as people. As an immigrant myself, I have been twice removed from my origins. My father was born in India. And in fact, today's a really special day because it's the 18th of November, and today my father would have been 99 if he was still alive. So it's a very special day for me to be standing in front talking about my father. So my father was born in India, but at the age of 16, he went to Tanzania as part of the British colonial service to work and live out there. 10 years later, in 1947 at partition, his country, India, became Pakistan. So suddenly, he was technically homeless. But actually, he wasn't, because he was in Tanzania, his new adopted home, a place where he was living and working. He fell in love with my mother, and in time, me and my siblings were born. Apart from this crazy haircut that my mum gave me, it was a great place to grow up, and we were happy there. My father's origins, Pakistan, was a distant place. My grandparents lived there. We kind of had warm, fuzzy feelings about it. And what was that? How did that come about, of having some kind of connection to a land so far away that I'd never been to? I realized that even though I spoke English in school, Swahili in the streets, at home I spoke Urdu. And that was a language that sort of connected me with a culture that I understood through my parents and through that language. So it's all sorts of things that connects us to who we are and where we belong. At the age of 12, we moved once again, and I came to live in England. Coventry, the butt of many jokes I was to discover. But actually, Coventry was far from a joke. It was the place where I learned to eat fish and chips in a newspaper, walking in the snow. It was where my neighbors and friends helped me understand what it was like to be an English kid, to live in an English environment. And they made us feel at home, to the point that this became my home. England is my home. And it's allowed me to feel safe enough to then take on a career that takes me all over the world. As a filmmaker, I get sent to far-flung places. And when I get there, I have to immediately find myself a home. I have to kind of familiarize myself with the language, the culture, the nuances, and also immerse myself in other people's lives. And other people welcome me into their lives and into their homes. And through tapping this lifeblood of who they are, I start feeling at home to be able to tell their stories. So I thought, what better way to talk about what home means to people, but through these people who I've met over the years, making films about them. One of the most recent films that I made, it was a 3-part series for the BBC called Dangerous Borders. And it was about partition 70 years on. And it was looking at how the people in India and Pakistan had formed their lives in those 70 years. What had become of them? So I traveled with a presenter from the south of Pakistan to the north over a 5-week period. My presenter, Adnan Sarwar, his parents are from Pakistan, but he was born in the Netherlands, and he's grown up in Burnley, of all places. As he always says, Burnley. And he says, I say it wrong. But he's from Burnley, and he felt nothing but British. So British that he even joined the British Army. He was willing to die for his country. Pakistan, the land of his ancestors and his parents, actually, was a distant thing. He pushed it aside. Why did he do that? Because he faced racism. He was called a Paki at school. He was beaten up for being a Paki. So he just put that part of his life away at a distance and didn't want anything to do with it. He shut it off. So then I took him on this journey, and I'd just like to show you a clip. This is at the end of the journey, after our 5 weeks of having traveled over 1,000 miles. This is the realization that Adnan came up to.
I'm leaving Pakistan with a real sense of optimism for the future. And not just for this country, but for myself. as a British Pakistani.
This is the end of my journey here in Pakistan. It's not the end of my relationship with Pakistan. I feel more of a Pakistani, I feel like it's more of me, and I feel that's just going to get more and more deeper as I visit this country more. This is a part of me.
So after those 5 weeks, by engaging with people along that journey, Adnan opened something up in his heart. He opened a door that had been shut in a house that he knew but didn't want to open. This gave him a sense of belonging, the familiarity of the smells, the tastes. Looking like a lot of people around him, Adnan suddenly discovered a home that he didn't know he had, that he'd put aside. The next film that I'm going to talk about is called Women, Weddings, War and Me. This was a film I made about 8 years ago with a young Afghan girl called Nelva Hetayat. She was born in Afghanistan and fled Afghanistan because of war. Her parents brought her to safety in England, and she grew up in Camden. And for all intents and purposes, she is a Camden girl in every way that you could imagine. But what was interesting is that she actually thought that she was still very Afghan. She identified with being Afghani. And she just thought that I'm not really English. And I'd like you to see this next clip.
This is Nell. She's 21.
In London, you can be whatever the hell you want, and I love what being here has made me.
Nell wasn't born in Britain. She arrived here when she was 6, after her family fled war and violence in Afghanistan. But growing up in London, she's always felt cut off from her roots.
I'm not English, but I'm not Afghan. I don't look Western, but I still have Asian skin. So where the hell do I belong?
So for Nell to find out where she belonged, even though she thought she was Afghan, we took her on a journey to Afghanistan to see what would it be like to live there, to make that her home. What was it like to be a woman in Afghanistan? So I took her on a journey to visit and meet women in different walks of life. We went to prisons where women were locked up for just being with the wrong man, for adultery. There were some women who were in refuges who'd run away from unhappy homes. The worst of it was, we met women in a burns unit in a hospital. Women who couldn't bear being in unhappy marriages had tried to take their own lives by burning themselves. Nell was exposed to women's lives in Afghanistan. Apart from the women who were victims, or survivors, let's say, she also met incredibly dynamic, brave women who were challenging patriarchy in Afghanistan, who were pushing the boundaries of what it is to be a woman. They were trying to make changes to their country. But in that journey, I think Nell, who went in there bombastically thinking that she was Afghan, she suddenly realized that actually she was really British. A lot of the things that she had taken for granted came to the fore, and she realized that Britain had made her what she was today. But she left humbled by these women, whereas before she'd thought, oh, why are you wearing a hijab? I wouldn't get married to someone that my parents chose for me. But by the end of it, she realized that these women were heroines. They were freedom fighters. And she left having completely transformed as to where she belonged. Just see this final clip from her film.
The girls there are brave, but they don't have a chance to be anything, and you gave me that. And I owe you so much, and I never, ever appreciated it.
I hope you have got your answer why we came here, because of your safety.
Apart from the fact that she realized what her parents had given her in terms of safety, she also recognized that actually Britain afforded her opportunities that she wouldn't have had if she'd stayed in what she believed was her home. Her new home had given her those opportunities to flourish as a woman and be dynamic, be educated, and become a TV presenter. She's a very, very successful presenter now. With both Adnan and Nell, they inadvertently discovered what their home was by going on these journeys, albeit for television. But there are so many people who don't have that choice, and they're forced out of their homes. They get moved because of war, disasters, and, in these last few years, we've become all too aware with this mass migration of people from Syria, Afghanistan, African countries, that people aren't safe where they are, and they have to seek new places that they could call home. So I made a film, this is about 6-7 years ago, before the Syrian crisis, a film for Panorama called Breaking into Britain. We followed 2 journeys, one from Afghanistan. So we followed Afghan migrants who were trying to come to Britain for a safer life, and we also followed African migrants who were trying to get to Britain. I spent 3 weeks in both journeys, and along the way, we met extraordinary people who had nothing. They had left behind family. They had left behind everything they knew and found themselves in very, very difficult, adverse situations, crossing country after country, looking for some kind of safe haven. We came across families who had to make doorways into homes for their little children, 3-year-old children, 1-year-old child. Later on, as I got further down to Patras, which is the place where most of the migrants are trying to get across to Italy so that they can then have a smooth, safe journey through the rest of Europe, because there are no more rivers and seas to cross. And I came across a bunch of young men who were trying to get onto the ships that were going across.
The migrants call this road their runway. It's where they hope to take off for a better life. Schwabe watches as whole groups take to the streets, attempting to board the trucks in plain view of everyone.
Interesting to see how they were having to lie to their parents and pretend that they were having a fantastic time, because if their parents found out that they were living in terrible conditions, living in orchards, living on the streets, they would be heartbroken, and they would regret ever having sent their kids off seeking a better life from the war-torn country they were from. The thing about these kids was that while we were there, they'd lost their homes, but what they hadn't lost was their dignity and their hospitality. When we were filming with them, they would bring oranges and apples for us, because it's what they would do in their home in Afghanistan. And they didn't forget that. They maintained who they were through just that little thing of hospitality. They didn't lose their humanity. And it was really touching for me to experience that. There are others who don't choose to leave their home at all, but are driven out because of a natural disaster. 14 years ago, I was in Aceh after the tsunami. I went there to make a film to see what life was like after people's lives had been completely destroyed, flattened out. People lost family members. They lost everything that constituted home, but except for a bunch of people who returned. And I want you to see this clip.
This is Lampuk in Aceh province. When the tsunami hit, the mosque was the only thing left standing. Before the wave, 7,000 people lived here. Only 1,000 survived. 6 weeks later, just 100 have returned. They are determined to rebuild their village and their mosque.
For the people of Lampuk, that mosque was their spiritual home. They saw it as a sign, and it's something that brought them back to that place. So it was a location that they came back to, but it was actually more than that. It was about a feeling. It was about a spiritual feeling of that mosque. And no matter what the difficult situation was, they put up their tents and they started building a community once again from scratch. There were orphan children who were adopted by other families who'd lost their children. There were men and women who married each other. And it just showed me that the human instinct to create family, community, a home is always there. We never, ever lose that, no matter what hardship we go to. It was humbling to see how they built their lives up over the 4 or 5 months that I filmed with them. They were extraordinary. They never gave up hope. And it is something that I think was there in all those people that I filmed with. They never, ever gave up hope. The film that probably had the most impact on me, this was called Frontlines Laos, and it was made in 2004, a year after the invasion of Iraq, and we went to film lots and lots of different conflicts in the world. And I was filming with the Hmong, who basically had fought with the CIA and the Americans during the Vietnam War. And when the Americans lost and they left, The new government in Laos saw these people as traitors because they had sided with the Americans. And these people fled into the jungles. I spent 3 days trekking through this mountainous jungle to find these people who'd been hiding for over 27 years, still persecuted and still at war. And the moment when I walked in is an image that I will never, ever forget. It's probably the film that's had the most impact in my life, because it just showed how people who are even pushed out of everything they know, they somehow wait to have some kind of hope in their lives and to go back to what they know is their home.
We were the first outsiders they had seen in 28 years.
They've been waiting to see someone from outside. They just think that we're the people who are going to take back something and tell the world. It's just so emotional, I can't even speak.
The thing I've realized on all my travels and filming with the amazing people along the way is that we here are lucky. I've realized that by a twist of fate, I have ended up living in Britain in a safe environment. I've realized that my life is a continuum, and that continuum has allowed me to flourish as a person, to do the things I want to do. Likewise with Adnan and Nell, we have found a home in Britain. And right now, there's lots and lots of people who are looking for safety. And our governments are turning against those people. Even the British people have been hostile towards some of the refugees. And I just say that having a home is the basic instinct in all of us. Nobody's coming here to sponge off the system. They're just looking for safety. And most of all, they're looking for a community to be part of, to make it their home and contribute to it just the way I have, Nell has, and Adnan has. And I think these people need to be given a chance because I think they would bring a lot more to our society than people like to believe. Thank you.